It's good to see you today, and good to begin with a laugh, because this is a happy cause. There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. Those are some of my favorite words in the Lord of the Rings movies, and there is some good in this world. I hope you agree. I hope you also agree with Samwise Gamgee that it's worth contending for, that what is good is worth fighting for. And I think that's why you've come today. It's certainly why I have come. Darling, a little bit later, all right? You're not quite yet in the schedule. Educational freedom is a good. It is a good thing that families have the autonomy, the independence, and the agency to educate their children. It's a sad mark, isn't it, of totalitarian countries that gets taken away pretty quickly. The state wants to plug children into its own messaging and its own propaganda. It's a public good that we have freedom in this country still to educate our children according to conscience and conviction. Now, why am I here today? I don't presume to tell you why you're here, but in the next few minutes, I'd like to describe why I'm here by talking about 3 threats to this good and 3 hats that I wear that make me concerned about these threats. So let's start by talking a little bit about the UN. We're going to go from big to small. We're going to go from the UN and UNESCO to the UK and the threats to educational freedom in our islands to Scotland. First up, the UN. The UN is a rights-based organization, is it not? It's all about human rights. And indeed, I think it's becoming increasingly apparent that the UN is using human rights and its concepts of human rights for control. Let me give you one example of this. And if you're a home educator or if you're a parent who values educational freedom, you should read this report. This is from UNESCO, published in September of last year. When you get home, print this out in color and remind yourself to read it before the week is done. Because this report shows us how the UN thinks of human rights, and particularly children's rights. It becomes very apparent in this report that the UN really doesn't get educational freedom. It wants, and it proposes in its report, Homeschooling Through a Human Rights Lens, that every state's party to the UN's agreements registers and establishes mechanisms of surveillance on every family who are not in the state school system. This is how the UN sees it. And it's all rights-based. This is the thinking. Step 1, we give you these rights. But step 2, we insist that we, the UN and related states parties, have the responsibility to make sure you're making these rights work for children. And henceforth, you have the establishment of a global educational regime that is run through nation states. That should concern us all. That's what we're talking about when we talk about rights-based control. That's why we have placards that say, "Dear UNESCO, children's rights are not a tool of control." That's the big picture. I do encourage you to read UNESCO for yourself. Just make sure you pour yourself a stiff drink before you do so. Now, going on one level down to the UK, there is right now in Parliament, in the House of Lords, a bill, the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, which works out this UN thinking in a very practical way in England and in Wales. Wales has opted into it. This would introduce, among other things, compulsory mandatory registration. Now, what's in a register? What could be so bad about this? Well, this is a case file on every child not educated within the system. One way or another, the state will know about every child and intimate details about every child. It will be building and maintaining a case file on every child not in the system. What about here in Scotland? The third threat. We already have MSPs, Ross Greer was already mentioned, who believe in outworking this agenda via the copy and paste mechanism, which is so often relied upon, unfortunately, by the Scottish Parliament. What they're doing in England and Wales, if it's progressive enough, we should copy and paste it here in Scotland. We've got calls for that right now. And so it is very important, and I'm so glad you're here, to say here in Scotland, we do not want this kind of measure. Moreover, we will stand with those in England and Wales who today and right now are protesting against this invasive bill. But what I want you to see is that Labour down south have a pincer movement going on On the one hand, they're squeezing the private school sector, taking away parental choice, the ability of parents to establish schools, squeezing the private schools, squeezing, on the other hand, the home educators. Where do they all get squeezed into? Where does the pressure push them? Into the state school system. And by the way, we need more money from the taxpayer to fund all of these invigilators, all of these agents who will be visiting home educators as part of this. So there are three threats from the UN, the UK level, and here in Scotland. Now, I said I would talk about three hats that I wear. Like many of you, I wear multiple hats. And thank you, darling. We didn't quite rehearse this, but we need to work on our double act. As well as being a father, darling, where are you? Okay.
You are a fun hat.
Okay. As well as being a father, I have three hats that I wear. Like many of you, I'm a citizen, I'm a friend, and I'm a Christian. And on all three counts, I'm concerned about what is happening. As a citizen, let me direct your attention to the building behind me. This building, whatever you think of it and how much it costs to build, seeks to demonstrate the value of transparency. It has transparent features. You go in, the committee rooms are see-through. You can see what our leaders are doing, what they're saying. You can even see the efforts to show the drawn windows, the drawn curtains, letting in light, letting in accountability. Isn't that how it's meant to be? In a democracy, we should see our leaders, they should not see us all the time. In a democracy, the walls of the parliament are transparent, but the walls of the cottage and the apartment and the house are necessarily opaque. We should be able to see our leaders. They should not be able to subject us to surveillance. People talk about what makes democracy work. Is it freedom of speech? That's important. Is it the rule of law? That's certainly important. I would say even more, though, is the freedom of society to operate with its God-given freedoms. And that includes the freedom to pass on our heritage, our history, our convictions to our children. Do you agree with me? It's an essential democratic safeguard. The second hat I wear is as a friend. I have friends down south who are afraid today because they believe the state is about to put a foot in the door which they'll never be able to close the door against again. Once registers are established, once systems of information collation are established, there's no going back. This is a ratchet that only goes one way. So as a friend, I'm here to say to all those in England and Wales, we have your backs. We are going to support you to the degree that we can here in Scotland. And I hope you join me in that as well. We need to unite together because this is a common enemy. We've talked about the UN threat, which is uniform all across the nations. This same battle is playing out right now. So as a friend, I hope you join me in supporting this cause. And finally, as a Christian, I'm a Christian. I'm unashamed of that. I've trusted in the Lord Jesus Christ for my own salvation, but I also confess that he is Lord of all the nations. And the scriptures clearly teach that he will one day return to judge the living and the dead. Now, that means that parents, we're going to be judged one day. And I think one of the things the Lord will ask us is how we raised, how we protected, how we educated, how we disciplined our children. Did we do it according to his plan? But the Bible also reveals that the Lord is going to judge the nations. There's a psalm in the Bible, Psalm 2, which addresses the nations. It addresses our parliaments, our kings, our rulers, our parliamentarians. And it says, "Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way." It challenges the leaders with justice. Are you governing according to God's plan? Now, it's very obvious from the Bible that God has entrusted the care and the raising of children to whom? Primarily to fathers and mothers. Therefore, a state which sets itself up against that plan, that ordinance of God, is being disobedient to a higher law. Now, we're fully aware our Parliament doesn't necessarily recognize a higher law. That doesn't mean any the less that it doesn't exist. And so, in love for our leaders, we should be calling on them to respect this right, not only because of its democratic importance, but also because of its eternal consequences. So those three things, three threats that we should be concerned about, three hats I wear that bring me here today. And finally, What we want to be saying to the UN is that they've shown us their end game and their game plan. It's in black and white. Actually, it's in purple. But they've shown it to us, and what we say to the UN, respectfully, not in our own name, but because we serve a higher law, we say, cease and desist the usage of children's rights to do what you want and to foist your ideology on the nations. We say to the UK Parliament, we implore them not to introduce the Children's Wellbeing Bill. There is a history, good form for U-turns at the moment, so we implore Keir Starmer, please U-turn on this as well. And finally, we say to the Scottish Parliament, as respectful citizens, please do not copy and paste this miserable legislation, but give your blessing rather to the families who want to raise their children according to conviction and according to their own choice. Thank you very much.